The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Dean's Beans Organic Coffee, a locally based, worker-owned company committed to social and environmental responsibility, roasting fair trade, organic, shade-grown coffee since 1993. DeansBeans.com.
Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. Later in the show, an exploration of local history that is older than the nation itself, and a hard look at the way history is portrayed by its victors and survivors, as we explore the monuments old and new to the Peskiumpskit and the massacre of 350 years ago with David Brule of the Nolambika Project.
But first, Live Music Friday with a band right out of Chicago who will take the stage at the Iron Horse in Northampton tonight. In front person, Casey Gomez-Walker's own words, Case Oates is a band that doesn't take itself too seriously, but also knows that making art and music is something you really ought to be serious about.
Their debut album, Last Missouri Exit, allows memory to turn into feeling, which then turns into meaning, where rich storytelling spreads warm instrumentals that evoke both the sound of home and the world waiting outside. And tonight, they'll perform at the Iron Horse in Northampton. Welcome to Live Music Friday on the Fabulous 413. Case Oates, let's hear a song.
Fell in love in 83. Your hair was long and blonde. Your daddy didn't like me. He said I tried to do you wrong. And though you barely knew me, we got the grand idea. You shook my hand and said, baby, you got yourself a deal. Diane, Diane, I tried to stay with our plan. Diane, Diane, I'm saying that I'm still your man, and I'm hoping you'll wait at the bottom of Bitterroot Lake. Said I'd steal a plain deer and fill the tank with gas. I knew the way to Mexico, and you didn't think to ask. Was damn near foolproof. Just follow the birds in flight, find some smooth still water, and climb on down from the sky. Diane, Diane, I tried to stay with our plan. Diane, Diane, I'm saying that I'm still your man, and I'm hoping you'll wait at the bottom of Bitterroot Lake. Passing over Montana, we picked a place to land. The air became our foe and you held onto my hand. And when we hit the water, I saw your face in fright. You were stuck and tangled, though I tried with all my might. Swam on down to shore and by myself I fled. Tried my best to save you, but I knew you were dead. Diane, Diane, I tried to stay with our plan. Diane, Diane, I'm saying that I'm still your man, and I'm hoping you'll wait at the bottom of Bitterroot Lake. The local kids who found you said she don't look quite right. Thought that you were sleeping and the sun was shining high. You know they never found me. I'm on the wanted list. The guilt has nearly killed me, and I don't know how to live. Dreams of you still haunt me. I see you floating there. My love has never faded. I dream of your wet hair. Diane,
Case Oates, Live Music Friday in the Fabulous 413 with Casey Gomez-Walker on vocals there, guitarist Max Subar, bassist Jason Ashworth, fiddle player Scott Daniel, and drummer Spencer Tweedy, playing the Iron Horse in Northampton tonight. That song is, as I have read, based on a true crime drama story, an actual
Yeah, it's
real
a true story.
murder mystery story.
Yes.
Are you a big true crime drama person?
Unfortunately, I am. Yeah. I would say for better or worse.
It's also one of two very hooky female name songs on the new album.
Yes.
Nora, the other one. You get these.
They're back to back.
Yeah.
Both true stories.
Well, talk about, this isn't the first, sort of sound you tried to put music in your writing. That sentence didn't come out the way that I wanted to, but this one will. What suited your writing better about this sound as opposed to the garage rock that you kind of started with?
I don't know. Good question. I feel like I just was trying to storytell in whatever way I could. I was trying to write garage rock music, and I did, and there were some songs that worked out that never saw the light of day, but really it was the first thing that caught. It was the first thing that worked, was this sound, and the first thing I played live and started actually putting together.
Tell us about the name Case Oates. I hear that has to do with the hamster.
It does have to do with the hamster.
Your name is Casey.
My name is Casey.
Last name is not Oates.
My last name is not Oates. I had a beloved hamster named Oates. She was awesome. And basically, Case Oates was my internet screen name.
Uh-huh.
And I had it as my login for everything for a long time. So when
What was your password?
Stop
No,
it.
I'm just kidding. What's your mother's maiden name and your last
Maybe
four digits
Oh
of
my
your
God.
social security?
This is no.
It's okay. I know cybersecurity. I would never give it away.
Hooray!
You've accepted the phishing.
Click. No, but yeah. So it was my online screen name. So when we first uploaded, Spencer and I recorded the song Bluff together many years ago, and we uploaded it to Bandcamp, and I just did it under Case Oates. And I thought that I would change it eventually and maybe just go by my name, but it stuck, and I never did. So
It's a great band name.
thank you.
Yeah.
Are there things that are hard about keeping narrative in cadence with music for you?
No, because I always write lyrics first, and then fit the music around it. So I think, sometimes I have to not be so precious and know that I have to cut some phrases and words out to make it work. But I think
Everybody needs an editor. It's totally fine.
everyone needs an editor. Write sober, edit drunk, or write drunk,
Write
edit
drunk,
sober.
edit sober. That's what they
One
say.
of those, yeah.
The album does reflect that might be the case, at least. There's a
Yeah.
lot of drinking that happens on the album. But what I will say is that I've seen listened to a lot of music where it sounds like the lyrics were written first and they're crammed in there.
Yeah.
But I never get that impression from this
Yeah.
new album at all.
Thank you.
It's very easy sounding, and
you.
you want it to kind of flow, and it totally does. And the album is Last Missouri Exit, and we're with Case Oates. We're playing the Iron Horse tonight. I hope this isn't divulging too much, but you went to Hope and Olive in Greenfield for lunch at the request of the owner and good friend of mine, Jim Zaccara, who's a huge fan.
Mm-hmm.
What did you get?
I got a BLT, and it was so delicious.
And anybody else want to say what they got?
The veggie melt with broccolini was
That
excellent.
was Scott, veggie melt with broccolini. Spencer?
The Tempeh Reuben.
Tempeh Reuben?
Max and I did a half-half.
We have a split.
They split.
The lamb burger
And the
Oh,
turkey Reuben.
The lamb burger is very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we had chocolate cake.
Nice.
So I'm
We had
really
some
And
full.
French
Jim gave you
burgers.
something in the car for me that it's still there?
Yeah, for both of you.
Oh no.
Yes.
It,
Wait.
it might match something that we ate.
It's going to make the fun drive that much more fun. Well, let's hear another song from Case Oates playing at the Iron Horse in Northampton tonight. Live Music Friday in the Fabulous 413.
Thought I had to be a devil. Threw my jewelry in the sink. Turned my life into a shovel. Buried you piece by piece. The stars are not so distant. The stars are undefeated. A little love, it calls to you. It's closer than you think. And I'm living in the rubble, and the president's not so great. But your friend just had a baby, and I'm coming for a drink. The stars are not so distant, the stars are undefeated. A little love, it calls to you. It's closer than you think. And I'm blushing at my neighbor, laying sideways in the street. But I'm dreaming my own dreams again. I can feel it in my teeth. The stars are not so distant, the stars are undefeated. A little love, it calls to you. It's closer than you think. The stars are not so distant, the stars are undefeated. A little love, it calls to you. It's closer than you think.
Case Oates, Live Music Friday here in the Fabulous 413. Casey Gomez Walker, Max Subar, Jason Ashworth, Scott Daniel, and Spencer Tweedy.
And shout out to Scott Daniel with, I think we're starting to collect 5-string fiddles too, in the same way that we collect harp players.
And accordion players.
And accordion players.
Yeah.
Niche instruments is our thing.
Yeah, that's an interesting. I didn't even notice it was 5-string. Thanks for pointing that
No
out.
problem.
Yeah. Why have 4 when you can have 5? Congratulations to Casey and Spencer, who are engaged.
Thank you.
And will be getting married when? Later this year?
Yeah, this year.
That's really fun. And hopefully we'll see several of you at least in a month when we do our show live from Solid Sound.
Yes.
Yay!
Should we say the big news about Solid Sound yet?
No.
Not even in present company?
No.
All right, then, listeners, keep listening. That's a teaser for you. Meanwhile, you can check out Case Oates at the Iron Horse in Northampton tonight. Thank you all so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Yes. Up next, we'll head to Turner's Falls, where David Brule of the Nolambika Project helps us to explore the lesser-known history returning to the nation's narrative and their Day of Remembrance events on May 16th.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
Spent too much time caught up in this issue.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Mass Humanities, presenting a second year of Smithsonian Museum on Main Street, including a lecture on the future of democracy, June 4th at Mohawk Trail Regional School. Information at masshumanities.org/events. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the UMass 5 College Credit Union, dedicated to creating access to financial well-being for local people, businesses, and communities. Insured by NCUA, umass5.coop.
This is the first full-on rain interview I think we may have done where we're all under umbrellas.
Yeah, you missed the last rain one we did. I think you were away when we did CISA in the rain.
Yeah, well, good thing I got an NEPM umbrella during the last fund drive because I'm standing under that right now, and it is dismal, and the conversation we're about to have is also somewhat dismal.
We've had a pile of bummers this week.
Yeah. This summer, on the 4th of July, people will be commemorating the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. But this weekend, people will be commemorating something that happened 100 years before that on May 19th, 1676. We are on Route 2, right over the Gil Montague Bridge, where there is a stone monument that says, Captain William Turner, with 145 men, surprised and destroyed over 300 Indians encamped at this place, May 19th, 1676. The village on the other side of this bridge is named after Captain William Turner, Turner's Falls. It is grammatically incorrect as well.
Yes.
And we are here with David Brule, the president of the No Lumbika Project. Welcome back to the show, David. Thanks for meeting us in the rain.
No, this is great to be here. Thanks for inviting me. And this weather would have been typical of that May 19th, 1676 morning. Thunderstorms would have been happening, and I think that was kind of what we had heard from native informants through their oral traditions, that the thunder kind of belied what was about to happen with the musket fire. And so there was some alarm when they heard the first thunder happening, and then they went back to sleep, and then the next thing they knew, a musket was stuck into the Witu and fired, and that's when it all began.
People may be familiar with this area. There is Cielito Lindo, the Mexican food truck here, which I love. There's a pot shop on the corner that used to be a motorsports shop. But tell us geographically what was going on 350 years ago here.
Yeah, so right here where we are was an extensive encampment of native people, and many, many different Indian nations had gathered here at the falls. One of the problems, well, let's say that over 10,000 years, people gathered here in peace to fish, because the falls was a significant fishing grounds, and all kinds of species, migratory fish were coming up, and the research and archaeology that's been done here really does indicate that there were about 10,000 years of habitation. This camp in particular in 1676 was a place of refuge, because many of the tribes from the coast, as well as the Nipmuc nations from interior Massachusetts, so the Narragansett, the Wampanoag, the Nipmuc, had gathered here, as well as their Abenaki allies from what's now known as New Hampshire and Vermont, were gathered here to figure out what to do. It had been a devastating year, and many thousands of refugees had come up from the coast and joined their Nipmuc relatives and camped at Northfield during the winter, and then with the full intention of coming down here to the falls in the spring. So this entire area would have been populated by several thousand native people, and what is now flooded, called Barton Cove, that was an extensive campground. So this entire area, as I said, would have been clustered with native Witus and wigwams and campfires and hearth fires until the dawn raid on May 19th. This spot is kind of curious because historically in 1900, a farmer, Timothy Stoughton, who owned extensive lands here in Gil, set aside this particular plot of land for memorializing the so-called victory in quotes of William Turner. Little did he know that the probably half-acre plot that he had bequeathed to the Pecumtuck Valley Memorial Association was going to be right at the four corners of a really busy highway, stoplights, a mobile station across the way, Cielito Lindo next door. We're on a teeny-weeny plot now.
But the monument is still here. Who's in charge of this monument now? And is there a movement at all to maybe change what the monument says?
Great question, because breaking news is that the Pecumtuck Valley Memorial Association that erected this monument in 1900, thousands of people here, 3 hours of speeches no less, they have in their wisdom, thanks to Tim Newman, director of the Pecumtuck Valley Memorial Association, he and I got together about 3 years ago, and he said, David, I think we would like to turn this deed over to the Nolembika Project and our native allies. And so that's what happened literally about a week ago.
Wow. So it is breaking news.
Yeah. So the monument, for all it's worth, and this teeny-weeny postage stamp piece of land now belongs to the Nolembika Project and the Chibunagungamaga Band of Nipmuc Indians and the Elnu Abenaki from southern Vermont. So the three of us are co-stewards, and we are going to do something about the wording and what else should be here. So at this stage, I mean, myself as an educator, I'm not really ready to like blow up this monument. I think it's more of a testimony as to what people thought back then.
Yeah, I was gonna
and
say,
what
like, it's important to make sure that people remember what their opinions were at the time, so that you can see how the progress has happened. We have the same conversations in the Black community.
Yeah.
So our plan, thanks to Diane Dixon and a number of other people, Diane being our impresario of the Nolembika Project, we have come up with a plan, a campaign, to put out a request for proposals to all of the indigenous people in the Northeast to come up with a plan for an alternative or counterbalance, probably a sculpture. We'd like it to be something recognizable that Native people coming through here, stopping at the stoplight, would look over and say, oh, what is that all about? Because this stone, for example, is here. I would say 90% of the people who come through don't even notice it, and they don't get out to read what it says.
Yeah.
But there are people who know what it says, and there are people on May 19th that do a good job of dumping red paint on the monument, or covering it with black garbage bags, or burying it under pine boughs and things like that. So we're going to have somewhere to the right of this stone, we will have something. Could be something from like a giant feather, or it could be a giant turtle, which would be very appropriate considering Turtle Island, but we don't know yet.
There is a place undercover at Unity Park, and then we could still kind of look at the river and see. You want to?
Close to the Discovery Center?
Well, it's across the street, but let's go to Unity Park, and then we'll reconvene.
We won't get out of the rain, but it'll be.
Well, we'll get out of the rain somewhat.
Yeah.
More with the Nolembika Project's David Brule out of the rain, hopefully, in a second, because this Saturday is remembering and reconnecting 350 years after the Great Falls Massacre.
So this is a short poem written by a resident of Gill for the commemoration of the massacre, no less. It was written in 1876.
200 years since the massacre.
150.
150 years ago from now.
150 years ago. So he
massacre.
wrote it in 1876. And it's kind of prophetic in the sense that he kind of envisioned what was going to happen. And this is way before the monument was set up and everything. But apparently they were commemorating this great victory even then. But he said, here where the fisher stood and speared his prey, here where the Indian happy in the wild thanked the Great Spirit for this paradise, here shall stretch the broad highways from shore to shore, and the din of traffic and its roar shall drown the thunder of the falling flood below.
We just experienced all
Pretty
that.
amazing. Yeah, exactly,
literally.
because we were like drowned out by the din of the traffic, you know?
Well, it's still rainy, but a little quieter without all the Route 2 traffic. Now we're at Unity Park, right along the banks of the Connecticut River, along with this bike path. But there are new signs that commemorate what went on here 350 years ago this weekend with the so-called Turner's Falls Massacre. So we're going with David Brule to look at these new signs. Are the signs from the Nolembika Project, or where'd they come from?
You know, we've just finished a 13-year study of this massacre that was funded by the National Park Service. And one of the outcomes in our grant was to develop educational signage. Using those funds, we have developed 3 signs, one being composed and written by the Chibunagungamaga band of Nipmuc Indians, one of the signs by the Abenaki, and the third sign by the archaeologists that we hired, Kevin McBride and David Nomek. So we have 3 signs.
There's that stone up on Route 2, which doesn't really convey the scale of the area that the indigenous people were in and that the massacre occurred over. Do the signs help try to convey a little bit more of how much space this actually took up?
Exactly, and especially the Abenaki sign tries to also convey the spiritual aspect here. The falls were incredibly important in terms of certainly of culture, but also the spirit that natives brought to this area or that they found here. And the tragedy is that what we learned through the study is that when, for example, the Nipmuc community began working with us on the study, they hardly knew the story. It was so traumatic, it had been buried so deep that they really evoked the fact that the landscape no longer told them the story, so they didn't remember. The stories that the falls would have held for them, the strength of the spirit, the depth of the spirit here was lost. And the hills, the Wissatinawag Hill ridgeline, they didn't tell them anything. And so when they first got here, it was like, coming into a new space. They learned their own history by listening to what the local historians knew. And the Narragansett had a bit more of a, let's say, a tradition of writing things down. So all of us learned a whole lot. If you're looking across the river right now from where these signs are, all that is housing, but that would have been indigenous encampments all the way from there, all the way over through what's now flooded Barton Cove to that ridge line, which is known as the First Light campgrounds and beyond. But on that particular day, the encampment across the river would have been a safe camp. It would have been the non-combatants, the elderly, and the women and children, whereas the native soldiers were right here, camped right here in Unity Park. They were camped up on Canada Hill or Wissatinawag. They were camped at the mouth of the Deerfield River and on the islands near Rock Dam, not far from the patch. And so Turner somehow managed to make his way through those camps to go up to about where Kosmeska's bus company is now, and then hang out until dawn, and then they swept down and just wiped out the entire village. No survivors. Some of the people were killed by musket fire. Later they were told, the soldiers, the English were told to save their gunpowder and use their knives and swords. And a lot of natives jumped into the river and were swept over the falls. So the river itself would have been about 30 feet lower. This would have been quite a chasm here with a really rapid water, flowing water. So now it's, the dam has silenced the falls, and the bridge across it has created, on the contrary, a lot of noise, as we were noticing up at the stoplights there.
And for thousands of years, this was a place of peace where the different communities of indigenous people would come together and negotiate and fish, right?
Yes, exactly. Peter Thomas, who is a local historian and probably the local authority on this particular spot, did research in the 70s, but he and his team really drilled down to about 9,000 to 10,000 years of earth and finding where there were artifacts. And the idea, of course, was if you are a native person, let's say you're a Narragansett or a Wampanoag on the coast, and you're about ready to find a spouse, then this was a good place to do it. You'd come here and there'd be many other nations gathered here from the far north, from the Pinnacook and the Abenaki, and from the south, the Waranoco and Agawam. Everybody converged here, so it was a good place to meet a girlfriend or a boyfriend. It was a good place going up in what we call the Montague Plains now, but going up into those pitch pine plains and finding medicinal plants and ceremonial herbs And it was just a really great place to spend some time and to meet other people and, eventually renew your gene pool.
We are on the banks of the Connecticut River. We're with David Brule of the Nolembika Project. This weekend commemorates 350 years since the so-called Turner's Falls Massacre, which happened right across the river from where we stand right now, where Captain William Turner, at the behest of the colonial government, came after experiencing some oppression himself as a Baptist who was imprisoned and not allowed to start his own church, was given a devil's bargain to get out of jail and start your own church, but go and massacre all of these innocent indigenous people along these banks.
Christian thing to do.
Turner himself was released from prison, having spent 5 years in a Puritan prison, which probably would have been medieval conditions. And he was 63 at the time. Because he had some limited military experience, things were going badly for the Massachusetts Bay Colony. And as you said, the devil's bargain was for him to come out to the valley here and to kill and fight Indians. He wrote to the Massachusetts Bay Colony in April of 1676 saying, "I'm too old for this." He literally wrote that saying, you should find somebody younger to lead this type of battle because, he was didn't quite envision the massacre that was going to happen, but in April things were going badly. So he really asked to be relieved of his command, and the Massachusetts Bay Colony said, "No, nothing doing. That's the bargain. You're going to go to it." So I don't know if he knew he was headed to his destiny. I kind of think about Turner and Custer in the same thought, heading into what was going to be their final hours on this planet.
Because Turner was killed at the end of the massacre.
Yeah, that was really fascinating. For somebody who was born and raised in Turner's Falls to find and read the court document when this massacre occurred, it was kind of the morale breaker of the native people. And by August, it was all over. Metacomet had been killed.
And by that, you mean King Philip's War, the so-called
Philip's War, Metacomet. So the name Philip was attributed to this native leader, Metacomet, but it goes either by the whole incident, the whole war, which is about 18 months, goes either by Metacomet's resistance or King Philip's War. But once this happened, many of the various tribes that had survived headed back home. So the Wampanoag and the Narragansett went back. The Nipmuc just tried to disappear into the wilds of central Massachusetts for years, generations. As I was saying, by August it was over. What happened, of course, in English style, the way they took care of business, quote unquote, in Ireland and Scotland is they tracked down every single rebel and made sure they paid the ultimate price. And so most of the leaders were either hanged or shot on Boston Common. Others were put on trial. The one who was put on trial that comes back to the story I was going to mention is a man named John Wecklepeak. He was quoted in his trial, and the clerk of courts wrote it down in this old-fashioned English way of writing, and we saw that document that Wecklepeak said, "I was there when Turner was shot over near where the Greenfield swimming pool is now." And he said,
which is actually a river, it's not a pool.
Yeah, it's a beautiful.
We all call it the Greenfield swimming pool.
Yeah. But he said, I was there when I saw Turner get shot, and I know it was Turner because he told me his name. So this was like, wow, here's an eyewitness account to the perpetrator of the atrocity being killed. And that was in the court record. So he, as a warrior, he testified with his honor at saying, yeah, I saw this, I was there. And they said, good, now we're going to kill you. So they took him out and executed him within the half hour of his testimony. So that's kind of what was going on all the time. But I find that, just hearing and reading an eyewitness account is pretty powerful.
We'll continue with David Brule of the Nolembika Project shortly as we explore the disconnect between the tales we're told and the people erased from those stories, the new monuments to that history being dedicated tomorrow at their Day of Remembrance, and more.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by GZA Geoenvironmental, an employee-owned environmental consulting firm in Springfield and Syracuse, hiring entry-level to project managers in ecological and civil engineering to share in GZA's future. GZA.com.
There's much ballyhoo about whether this village should still be called Turner's Falls, but the thing that gets lost for most people's history, and that I learned from you years ago, Captain William Turner's lieutenant during the so-called Turner's Falls massacre, what was his name?
So that was Lieutenant Holyoke.
The Holyoke of Holyoke, Massachusetts, which no one ever is talking about saying that they should change that name.
And interestingly, he's a kind of a case study along with the chaplain, Hope Atherton, of one of the few recorded instances of what happened to these men after this massacre. And both Holyoke and the Reverend Atherton took their own lives within a year. The PTSD, which was not a phrase known at the time, took its toll on many of these men. Other men just went back to their lives. And one of the sidelines that turned out to be really fascinating, and I'll just go down that rabbit hole for a second, is that if you were in this valley in the 1950s, you would have heard John Hygas of WHAI reading chapter by chapter every evening over the radio the story of the boy captive of Old Deerfield. So I grew up on that. I found it totally fascinating. Total fiction. Now we know that. But the person who was the central figure is Stephen Williams. He was the son of the parson taken captive in 1704. So he was the boy captive of Old Deerfield, and he was eventually ransomed back after several years living among the tribal people and learning tribal languages. So over the next 80 years of Indian wars, it didn't end in 1676. The native resistance lasted literally up until 1760. Very long time. The natives did not give up. But Stephen Williams took it into his head after a while of saying, I should try to find the veterans of that particular falls fight, which is what they called it, and interview them. So he wrote everything down. He talked to the men who had survived, probably in the 1720s or so, but he wrote it all down. And he interviewed the veterans, the English veterans, and some native people. And that notebook survives. However, for about 150 years it was lost. It just disappeared. And it turned up at auction. The Pecumtuck Valley Memorial Association scrambled, went down there, checked it out for its authenticity, and bought it. So it is now that Stephen Williams notebooks are now back at the PVMA Museum. During this particular study, again, our hero, local hero Peter Thomas, went to the PVMA library and he transcribed all of Stephen Williams' notes from Old English into something readable. And of course, the archaeologists and the anthropologists who were doing the research found it incredibly invaluable because you had an eyewitness account told and written by some of the men who were actually there. That's a huge find for us. And that was, that is only about 10 years old, that particular part of the stories. But you never know what'll turn up.
Has the Pecumtuck Historical Society, has that always been the name of the organization?
Yes.
And no disconnect there for honoring Turner, but having a historical society called the Pecumtuck Historical Society.
You live in Massachusetts, and it was the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and lots of indigenous words that were...
So the Pecumtuck Valley Memorial Association was founded by George Sheldon, who is like the Deerfield historian, and he also wrote histories of Northfield and other places. But he founded this in maybe about the 1870s. Sheldon was no friend of the native people in a lot of ways. He was a historian, so he had a sense of the Pecumtuck presence, but he also erased them. And in his history of Deerfield, he said, alas and alack, the last Pecumtucks rode off into the sunset, never to be seen again, the end of a noble race, da-da-da-da-da. And of course, modern-day scholars like Marge Bruchac or Lisa Brooks are very seriously challenging that whole erasure. He was promoting the survival of the hardy pioneers from whom he had descended, so that was then, and that's kind of symbolized by that monument over there and the wording. So we're here to like change that whole narrative.
Part of the narrative being changed about what went on here 350 years ago this weekend on the banks of the Connecticut River is the language that we use around it. All three of these brand new signs at the top of them say Peskiumskit. Can you tell us what that word means, where it comes from, and why it's important enough to be on all three of these signs?
Right. So the accepted indigenous place name is Peskiomskat. There's a little bit of discussion linguistically about the meaning of that first syllable. If it is P-E-S-K, it literally means thunder. If an English ear heard a little Peskiomskat, that little aspirated E, then it could mean split. And the O-M-P-S-K means stones or rocks. So it literally either means the Thunder Rocks place, the UT meaning the place of, like Massachusetts, S-E-T-T. That is another variation of Skut, meaning the place of. Wachusett, the place of the big mountain, things like that. So it literally means either the Split Rocks place or the Thunder Rocks place. So it all depends. I prefer thunder, and when our partner, linguistic partner, David Tallpine White, transcribed it, did the research, he's a member of the Chabunagungamog band, he attributed both meanings. So it could be the thundering Split Rocks place. But I find it ironic, as you probably would, that after a huge battle over the name of the local sports teams,
Which was the Indians here in Turner's Falls.
right?
Yay!
Literally adding insult to injury.
It got changed to thunder. So I don't think anyone really grasped that this was a 10,000-year-old name for the place. So basically,
That makes it more awesome. I kind of was on the fence about the thunder. Now,
Yeah.
not knowing that, I always thought Peskamskit meant the split rock. I hadn't heard the thunder
Yeah,
part.
yeah.
Now I'm psyched to root for the thunder.
Yeah, you hear that, Agawam? You can do it.
Yeah.
People like George Sheldon, who were trying to record place names. At one point, this was called Pescatook, which would have referred to the place, I guess, of the thunder or the place of the rock. A sideline is, you all know, the native name for Mount Sugarloaf is Weequamps. So there's the O-M-P-S, meaning rocks. So Weequa means the end of something, and the Omps means the end of the rocks. So if you see, the ridge line going all the way down past Poet Seat Tower and winding up in the headland of Mount Sugarloaf, then that's where finally it drops off. So that's the end of the rocks there. So those are the kinds of place name in native languages that we're really having fun trying to parse out the original meanings for a lot of these places.
Not to take it away from here and what happened here, but when Peskamskit was lost, where did indigenous resistance or just people meet instead?
Well, they stayed away from here.
Clearly.
And even modern day tribal people who joined us in the study said they felt almost, one woman informant actually said she felt physically ill coming down Route 2. And what Native people do to kind of help that feeling pass is to make offerings of tobacco. So she wrote in her report, because that was part of the funding, was that Native people could write their own story about what they thought happened here and what the impacts were. So this particular woman, Elizabeth James Perry, who will be present at the Discovery Center at the end of the month, teaching natural wool dyeing, we're using plants. Anyway, she wrote that she felt physically ill coming up Route 2 on the way home to Taunton, Dartmouth, I think she lived in. Where did Native people go? As refugees, many, Pocumtuck especially, went to the French missions in the St. Lawrence River Valley and, bided their time and came back in a raid in 1704, and they wiped out Deerfield. Some went into what's now known as the Stockbridge-Munsee band of Mohicans in Stockbridge, Great Barrington, and that way. That particular tribe took in refugees. As I mentioned earlier, people like Philip Metacomet, they went home to their homelands in southeastern Massachusetts and Rhode Island, where they were tracked down. The Narragansetts went home and went back in really decimated numbers. They were adopted by a Niantic tribe that did not get involved. And so both the Narragansett and Niantic descendants are still living on the reservation in Rhode Island. There were falls in, like Bellows Falls and falls up in Maine. Native people tended to, each of those places was raided and a lot of death and destruction happened.
David Brule from the Nolambika Project, you are of indigenous descent, and you grew up here your whole life in Turner's Falls. We are commemorating the 350th anniversary of the massacre that happened here this weekend at the Discovery Center, the Great Falls Discovery Center, right across the way from Unity Park, where we are right now. The town, and you mentioned that indigenous people avoided this place, and even up until this century have avoided this place. But in 2004, the town of Montague did something that I think is inspirational and is, like the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions that happened in South Africa, is potentially a way to move forward. Were you part of that in 2004?
I was busy working and teaching, so I didn't, I taught at Amherst High School for most of my career, so I was not part of it, although it's certainly part of our institutional memory now in the Nolambika Project. The people who were behind this reconciliation ceremony in 2004, many of whom were the Friends of Wissatinawag, which eventually morphed into the Nolambika Project.
Wissatinawag are those shining hills right over there,
the
right?
Hills, right. So
where the mist from the falls would make them glisten.
Oh yeah,
I love that.
you know your story.
It's because of you.
For sure. But that whole area was saved by the Friends of Wissatinawag from becoming a Walmart Plaza. And it's actually the site of a 10,000-year-old village, and there are burial grounds there. So luckily, the Friends of the Wissatinawag saved the place, and then the activists moved on to other things, and a few of the people stayed behind in Greenfield, Howard Clark and Joe Gravelin and Diane Dix and Pam Kelly, and the organization morphed into the Nolambika Project, where we had a bit more of a broader mission than just saving the land. It was more now turning into education. So I joined that when roughly around 2012 or so, and rapidly wound up. Joe Gravelin was the president. He welcomed me and then said, okay, I'm out of here. I'm retiring. And so, David, you take over. And I said, whoa, okay. Well, it sounded like I was meant to do this because I did live right across the river here. And as most natives of Turner's Falls never knew anything about this. We knew vaguely about Captain Turner because that was the name of the village, but we didn't know what happened. So once we really started getting into the study of what we call the battle, it was hardly a battle, it was a total massacre, but it was a battle because the native forces rallied and led a counterattack, which is incredibly costly to the English, and which was totally underreported all down through these years. But our team of archaeologists really were able to determine the route that the English retreated through and the sites where they were ambushed and the number of people that were killed and all of that. So yeah, I grew up here not knowing the story, but now it's kind of been what I've been meant to do. So I'm telling the story and sharing it with people. And we will, on Saturday, we'll have the commemoration of the 350th. And we have, through pretty much a lot of our efforts, you know very well that this site where we're standing now is where the Pakumtuk Homelands Festival happens. So that's been a huge part of the healing of this place, which is basically what we're focused on. Bringing out the story. The battlefield study was composed of 5 historical commissioners from the towns, not historical societies, but commissioners under Massachusetts general law, of which I am one, and the 5 tribal historic preservation officers. And we met once a month for 12 years and went over the stories and kind of exchanged information. Many of these historic commissioners had never seen, in quotes, a real Indian before because they effectively stayed in the shadows and under the radar. But when you mention truth and reconciliation, I really, that's always a theme I bring up, because we met all those years to study this site as opposed to getting together and saying, okay, let's all reconcile and let's all be hunky-dory friends and all of that. It was like not that at all. It was more like we're studying this aspect of something terrible that happened. And by the way, we are Native people and non-Native people and getting to know each other. The Pocumtuck Homelands Festival is situated right here on purpose. The music and the vendors and the artisans and the storytellers are right here opposite where that atrocity happened. But we are renewing that Pocumtuck tradition of welcoming people in. It's just a fantastic moment, and the person who did some of the paintings, the murals in the Discovery Center now, Deborah Spears Moorhead, was one of those Wampanoag who did not want to come here. She didn't want to be anywhere near here. And Diane kept asking her, and finally she acquiesced. And when she got here, she was totally convinced of the positive vibe and the fact that really good things were going on. So she's been here ever since, and she's been a major ally, as I said, and her exhibit is in the Discovery now as we speak, along with Robert Peters, who is another Wampanoag, who painted that beautiful mural of Pesquiomscut with a native man fishing at the falls. So yeah, things, we've really contributed to a new opening of relationships with the place, but also with the tribal and non-tribal people.
You grew up here. What do you call the village?
Yeah, you've got me on that spot. Right now, I kind of hold my breath or my nose, and I just call it Turner's Falls. I avoid using Turner's Falls when I can. I haven't gotten into calling it Great Falls.
It's boring. There's a lot of places.
Yeah,
Even the
there's
Discovery
too
Center, the school,
yeah,
there's
yeah.
too many great.
But it could be Thunder Falls, and that would be the name.
I kind of like that.
Isn't that close to Turner's Falls? Thunder's Falls, I think,
yeah.
is really
It's-
doable.
It's right there.
You mentioned in passing the desire among some people to change the name. The way I see it, what happened was, being the chairman at the time of the Historical Commission, but a petition arrived at the Board of Selectmen, the Montague Board of Selectmen, to change the name. And then immediately after popped up a petition to keep the name. So the Board of Selectmen turned to the Historical Commission and said, okay, you guys figure this out. Even on the commission we had differences of opinion. So what I proposed, along with Ed Gregory, was we had the information on William Turner. What we're going to do is put it on the website. People can, if they're interested, people can read to see what he was all about. And then we'll wait and see where these petitions go. And in fact, it never came up again. My position, I take some inspiration from what happened on Martha's Vineyard. The Martha's Vineyard Wampanoag, Gayhead, said, well, that Gayhead is a kind of a name that the English put on this place. We know it as Aquina. So they now have Gayhead Aquina. And I'm saying, well, Turner's Falls could handle that. You could have Turner's Falls Pesquiomscut as a transition. If you really started fighting about it, let's have a bilingual presence. And then perhaps over time, Pesquiomscut could rise to the surface. That's kind of what happened with the Turner's Falls Indians, because the newer generations, once you have a freshman class becoming seniors, never having heard of the Indians before, they just assume Thunder is really cool. That's who we are.
Yeah.
So it was pointed out, rightly so, by one of the historical commissioners that Turner's people really see the name as kind of a brand. They really identify with that particular name. And so, I know it would be really hard and psychologically for somebody to give that up. I'm hoping that if it does push come to shove, that there would be a transition period where at least somebody could buy into a bilingual name. And then we have Pesquiomscut Park already, and these signs are pushing it. And when I do my articles in the Montague Reporter, I usually use Pesquiomscut instead of TF. That's where I stand anyway.
The high school has already decided that thunder is cooler. Follow the teens.
One of the schools calls itself Great Falls Middle School, not Turner's Falls Middle School. So the transition is happening, and it's part of the process. You're next, Holyoke. Thank you so much for teaching us this history and being here with us on the banks of the Connecticut River, David Brule. There will be a commemoration of this massacre at the Great Falls Discovery Center this Saturday, the 350th anniversary of the massacre.
Right, and so we will be having a dedication of these 3 signs first Saturday morning at 10:30. There will be the Eastern Medicine Singers drum group, as well as a Nipmuc flute player, Strong Eagle Daly, who will be here, and there'll be a few words said by various representatives from the towns. The Park Service paid for the work in putting the narratives in place, but First Light contributed the money through their community service project for the construction of the signs, and they were done locally by the Hale company over in Gill. So Lynn Stowe-Tome did all of the putting together the graphics. So it's been a real community effort, but that'll be taking place 10:30 to 11:30, and then we'll all move over to the Discovery Center for the commemoration.
Thanks so much again.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Glad to have been asked to do this.
There will be ceremonies down by the river where David Brule was kind enough to take us to elucidate the history of what happened there 350 years ago and to dedicate the new signs that are down there. The entire event at the Great Falls Discovery Center will be emceed by David Brule, right there, who joined us from the Nolan Bika Project. There will be drumming from the group that you just heard right there as well. Pat Allen, who was the chair of the Select Board back in 2004 when that reconciliation agreement was signed, will be there, as well as Abenaki author and anthropologist Dr. Marge Bruchak, the award-winning poet and regular guest of this show, Martina Spada, Liz Coldwin Santana Kaiser, Elder Tribal Historic Preservation Officer and council member of the Chibunamungabog Band of Nipmuc Indians.
He says it so easily.
He does, and if I practice it, I can do it, and I love
Same.
to practice it.
Yes.
Roger Longtoe Sheehan, the Abenaki chief and musician, will be there. Artist and author Deborah Spears Moorhead, artist Robert Peters, and artist Diane Travers. They will all be there as part of this commemoration tomorrow at Great Falls, Peskiumskit, Thunder Falls, Split Rock Falls,
Yes.
or maybe Turner's Falls if you must.
Yes, but the Nolan Bika Project does events all year round, so head to their website to find out more information, not just about tomorrow, but about the things that they present year round, connecting us more with the people that were here before we were.
Next week on the Fabulous 413, we'll take you to the Berkshires and explore some literary history at Arrowhead, the home of Herman Melville.
Including the accidental, boys love, fan story of Melville and Hawthorne.
Yes, I didn't know about that.
We'll also get into the Frenetic Theater in East Hampton with the production of Legoland. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No.
We're going to go bird watching with acclaimed birder David Sibley in anticipation of something that you can get at the end of the fund drive that will make it excellent if you are a birder. We're going to try to experiment with it in the field with the country's greatest birder, David Sibley, who lives right here in Deerfield.
We'll also explore film restoration with Milestone Films, who are presenting Queen Kelly at Amherst Cinema next week. Lots of fun stuff. So make sure you're tuning in. I'm Khalees Smith.
I'm Monty Belmonte.
We'll talk to you next week on the Fabulous 413.